Your refrigerator did not invent food preservation, it just mechanized it. Long before compressors and freezer aisles, households were keeping food fresh with salt, smoke, sugar, vinegar, honey, fat, cold earth, and fermentation. These were not random folk tricks. They were systems, and a lot of them worked shockingly well. Some of these are still brilliant. Some are better treated as historical lessons, unless you follow modern tested food safety guidance. But together, they all prove the same thing. People did not survive before refrigeration by luck. They survived because they understood spoilage better than we give them credit for. One of these methods used nothing but cold running water. One turned fruit into a shelf-stable paste. One protected entire winter harvests underground for months. Let's get into it. Number 20. Water glassing eggs. This one sounds fake the first time you hear it, and honestly, it sounds fake the second time too. But people genuinely used to take fresh, unwashed eggs, drop them into a mineral solution of either sodium silicate or pickling lime, and carry summer eggs all the way through winter. That is how serious seasonal food shortages used to be. If the hens slowed down in December, you either planned ahead or you went without. Here is how it actually works. The solution seals the pores of the eggshell, slowing the natural off-gassing and moisture loss that causes eggs to go bad. Done properly, with truly fresh, unwashed eggs, and I mean same-day fresh, not supermarket fresh, water-glassed eggs can last up to a year and a half in a cool location. Not a myth, a year and a half. To do it, mix 1 ounce of pickling lime per quart of cold water, stir until fully dissolved, then pack your eggs point down into a clean food-grade crock or glass jar. Pour the solution over them until they are completely submerged by at least an inch. Seal the container and keep it in the coolest spot you have. A basement, a cold room, anywhere consistently under 55 degrees Fahrenheit is ideal. Check periodically that the eggs stay fully covered. When you are ready to use one, rinse it well. They will not be perfect for frying sunny side up after several months, but for baking, scrambling, and or cooking, they hold up remarkably well. Now, the honest caveat, modern extension services do not actively recommend this as a foolproof home method because commercial eggs have been washed and the protective bloom is gone, which changes everything. Use only farm-fresh, unwashed eggs from a source you trust, and understand what you're doing before you commit. But historically, this was not a fringe trick. It was how families ate eggs in January. Number 19. Meat preserved in aspic or natural gelatin. Aspic became a punchline sometime in the 1970s, and I get it. A translucent jelly wobbling on a platter with a pork chop suspended inside it does not exactly scream appetizing, but before it was a retro joke, it was genuinely practical. You made a rich stock from bones, skin, feet, and joints, the parts nobody wanted, simmered it long enough that it would set firmly when chilled, strained it clear, and then poured it over cooked meat so it cooled into a protective seal. It did 2 jobs at once, blocked air contact, and turned the scraps and connective tissue into part of the preservation system itself. To do it, simmer collagen-rich cuts, pork trotters, chicken feet, beef knuckles, with aromatics for 4 to 6 hours. You want the broth to gel firm when you spoon a little onto a cold plate. Strain it, pour it over cooked meat packed into a container, and refrigerate until fully set. A proper aspic seal will buy you several extra days in a cold room versus leaving meat exposed. It is a cold storage method, not a pantry one, but it shows how older kitchens used every scrap of the animal, right down to the collagen, to stretch food farther. Number 18, salt curing meat and fish salt, is one of the biggest preservation technologies in human history, and honestly, it still is. It pulls water out of food, drops water activity, and makes life dramatically harder for the organisms that cause spoilage. That is why salted meat, salt cod, cured hams, and dried fish fed families, ships, armies, and entire civilizations long before anyone had a plug-in appliance. My neighbor Gilles has been making his own salt-cured duck breasts every fall for years. The basic method: rub meat or fish heavily with a curing mix of coarse, non-iodized salt plus optional sugar and spices. A good starting ratio is about 3% salt by weight of the meat, so 30 grams of salt per kilogram. Then pack it tightly and hold it cold while the salt works its way through the flesh. Thin fish fillets can be ready in 24 to 48 hours. A big pork leg might need 2 to 4 weeks. After curing, rinse, dry, and optionally hang it in a cool, ventilated space. Done right, cured meat can last weeks to months depending on the salt level and storage conditions. And what people now pay premium prices for at a charcuterie counter started as a way to stop protein from going bad before winter ended. Number 17, hanging cabbages, whole with roots attached. This one sounds too simple to matter. You pull the cabbage with the roots still on and store it intact instead of trimming it immediately. That is the whole trick. And it works because every cut surface leaks moisture and opens a door for rot. Leave the cabbage whole and you are keeping it alive, or at least much closer to alive, as long as possible. Old growers would hang them upside down in a cold room, nestle them in damp sand, or set them in crates with the root ball intact. The method is simple. Harvest only sound. Unblemished heads, leave the wrapper leaves on, keep those roots attached, and store them cold and humid, around 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit with humidity over 90% if you can manage it. A proper cold storage situation can hold cabbage in good shape for 3 to 5 months. It is not glamorous. It is just dependably useful. Number 16, vinegar. Pickling is one of the cleanest examples of preservation by environmental takeover. You take a food that would otherwise spoil and drop it into an acidic world where the wrong microbes cannot survive. Change the pH and you change who gets to live there. This is one my wife Marie and I actually do every summer. We buy garlic in bulk from local Quebec farmers at the end of the season. We're talking big mesh bags of it. Peel every single clove and pack them into jars with 5% apple cider vinegar. We do a few different jars, one with fresh thyme and a bay leaf, one with dried cayenne and black pepper, one with cilantro and lime zest. After about 2 weeks in the fridge, the garlic starts to mellow out and pick up the flavors, and by week 4, it is something completely different from raw garlic. Softer, tangier, almost sweet. We go through it embarrassingly fast. How to do it? Sterilize a glass jar, pack in peeled garlic cloves or whatever vegetable you're pickling, add your herbs and spices, then pour over vinegar with at least 5% acidity until everything is fully submerged. Seal the jar and refrigerate. The flavor starts changing within a week and deepens noticeably over the following weeks. Important for modern kitchens. Garlic and vinegar should be kept refrigerated, not on a pantry shelf at room temperature. And current food safety guidance is very clear on this. It will keep in the fridge for several months easily. Number 15, ash-sealed grain and bean storage. This one sounds primitive right up until you understand the logic, and then it sounds brilliant. Dry grain survives by staying dry and staying ahead of insects. In traditional storage systems, clean wood ash was mixed directly with grain or layered around containers as a dry, alkaline barrier against pests. The ash was not feeding the grain, it was defending it, and it worked. The method is beautifully low cost. First, dry your grain or beans thoroughly, because any moisture will ruin everything. Then, use clean, fine-sifted ash, not ash with charcoal chunks or debris. Mixed lightly with the grain or packed around the outside of a storage container. FAO research on traditional grain storage confirms ash and dry sand as effective small-scale protectants. This is not a method for wet foods, but for dry goods it turns the fireplace into pest control. That is old-world frugality at its absolute sharpest. Number 14, drying fruit, herbs, and meat. Drying is ancient because it solves the biggest spoilage problem so directly. Remove enough moisture and decay slows down hard. Fruit gets smaller and sweeter and concentrated. Herbs lose bulk, but keep their fragrance if dried gently. Meat becomes portable protein that laughs at a long journey. My friend Sylvie makes dried apple rings every October and hands them out at Christmas like they are candy, because they basically are. She slices them thin, dusts them with cinnamon, and runs them in a low oven overnight. Every year people ask her what they are because they taste nothing like the leathery dried apples from a grocery store bag. The quick method: slice food evenly, thinner slices dry faster and more uniformly, then dry at 130 to 145 degrees Fahrenheit in a dehydrator or low oven, or hang herbs in a warm, ventilated spot out of direct sunlight. Fruit is done when leathery but not brittle. Meat jerky should be dry all the way through with no soft spots. Herbs are done when they crumble easily. Store everything sealed, airtight, cool, and dark. Dried herbs hold for about a year. Dried fruit runs 4 months to a year depending on storage temperature. Drying is not just preservation, it is storage compression. You shrink a harvest without shrinking its value. Number 13, Bran, or chaff-buried apples and pears. Apples and pears do not just rot, they bruise, sweat, breathe, off-gas ethylene, and quietly wreck their neighbors when stored carelessly. Older storage systems understood this, which is why serious apple sellers separated each piece of fruit, cushioned it against bruising, and packed it in something dry to absorb moisture and slow the spread if one piece started to go. The method is straightforward, but it demands good starting material. Only perfect fruit goes into long storage. No bruises, no insect damage, no cracks, no blemishes. Wrap each piece in paper or pack them individually in dry bran, sawdust, or straw so they are not touching each other. Store them cool and dark, ideally below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Under good conditions, apples can hold for 4 to 6 months. The moment the temperature climbs, that window shrinks fast. This is basically old school post-harvest management disguised as a pile of fruit in a box. Number 12, sugar preservation. With jams, syrups, and fruit butters. Sugar did not become central to preservation because people had a sweet tooth. It became central because concentrated sugar binds water and makes microbial life much harder. That is why old pantries leaned so heavily on jams, jellies, fruit syrups, preserves, and fruit butters. Sugar was not dessert. It was infrastructure. My mother-in-law, Denise, has been making apple butter every fall for as long as anyone in the family can remember. She starts with a bushel of Cortland apples, cooks them down for hours with cider and spices until the whole house smells like something you want to live inside, and then jars it using a water bath. A jar of that in February tastes like September somehow. The basic how-to: cook fruit with enough sugar. Generally 1 part sugar to 1 part fruit by weight for jam, though tested recipes vary, until it reaches a set point of around 220 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level. For shelf-stable storage, process the filled jars in a boiling water bath according to a tested recipe with appropriate timing for your altitude. Properly made jam or jelly keeps for 1 to 2 years shelf-stable, though quality is best in the first year. Sugar turned a seasonal glut into a pantry asset and stretched summer into winter in spoonfuls. Number 11, oil-sealed foods in crocks or jars. This one is fascinating because it shows both the genius and the danger of old preservation at the same time. Historically, oil was absolutely used as a barrier layer. It keeps oxygen off the surface, reduces drying, and helps carry and protect flavor. That is why you see it in old pantry traditions across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, covering everything from cooked vegetables to cured cheeses to dried herbs. But here's where this one requires a very clear-eyed caveat. Modern food safety guidance is explicit that low-acid, moist foods stored under oil can create exactly the oxygen-poor conditions that allow botulism to develop. Garlic and oil stored at room temperature is the classic example. It looks harmless, it smells fine, and it can still make you very sick. So oil as a preservation tool belongs in this script as a real historical method, but only with honest context. It was used on the right foods, usually in combination with salt, acid, or cold storage. It was never a magic trick on its own, and it should not be treated as one now. Number 10, smoke curing / cold smoking. When people say, "Well, smoked today," they usually mean flavor. Historically, smoke was not just flavor. It was part of a genuine preservation system. Real preservation smoking was almost always tied to salting and drying. A couple of smoky hours was never the point. The old method, salt the meat or fish first, using a dry cure or brine, then let the surface dry until it forms a tacky pellicle, that outer layer that smoke actually binds to. Then expose it to cool, steady smoke over time in a controlled environment, keeping the temperature below 90 degrees Fahrenheit for cold smoking. Good smoking wood like hickory, apple, or cherry contributes preservative compounds. The drying reduces moisture further, and the salt does the heavy lifting underneath. Together, that combination can turn fresh protein into something that lasts weeks in cool storage rather than days. Smokehouses were not mood pieces. They were technology. Number 9, fruit leather and dense fruit paste storage. This is what happens when preservation gets clever and stops trying to keep fruit looking like fruit. You crush it, spread it thin, dry it until it is transformed into something denser, tougher, more concentrated, and far easier to store. It is preservation by redesign. The method, puree ripe fruit. Overripe is actually ideal here, sweeter and softer. Spread it in a thin, even layer about 1/8 of an inch thick on a lined tray, and dry it at around 135 degrees Fahrenheit until it is no longer tacky, peels cleanly from the liner, and holds its shape when folded. At room temperature, a tightly wrapped roll keeps for about a month. In the freezer, properly wrapped fruit leather holds well for up to a year. This is not just anti-waste. It is fruit redesigned for portability and staying power. Number 8, pressure canning. This is where old preservation collides with modern microbiology, and the science matters enough that skipping it is not an option. Low-acid foods are the ones that fool people. Green beans, corn, meat, broth, soup, they all look harmless. But when sealed in an airless jar, the spoilage risk profile changes completely. Boiling water canning only reaches 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Low-acid foods need 240 to 250 degrees Fahrenheit to destroy botulism spores. Only a pressure canner gets you there. The non-negotiable steps. Use only tested, published recipes with verified processing times. Fill your jars to the correct headspace. Vent the canner fully before locking the lid. Process at the pressure and time that match your specific food and your altitude. Pressure requirements increase at higher elevations. When the time is up, Let the canner depressurize naturally. A full day of canning can move an entire garden harvest or big batch of homemade soup off the counter and onto a shelf for 1 to 2 years. That is not a quaint old skill. That is industrial logic brought into the home kitchen. Number 7, preserving food. Under animal fat/confit. Before confit became restaurant language, it was winter strategy. Salt the meat, cook it slowly submerged in its own fat, pack it under that same fat as it cools, and suddenly you have something dramatically more stable than a fresh roast sitting on a plate. The basic process: cure the meat with salt, about 2% by weight, plus optional thyme, bay, and black pepper for 24 hours. Then cook it very slowly, fully submerged in rendered duck fat, lard, or other animal fat at around 180 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 to 3 hours until tender. Pack the cooked meat tightly into a clean crock or jar, and pour the strained fat over it until everything is covered by at least an inch. Historically, this extended the life of meat meaningfully in a cold cellar. For a modern kitchen, treat it as a refrigerated method, but know that kept cold and fully sealed under fat, it holds beautifully for several weeks, and the flavor actually improves over time. Fat was not just fuel. In the right kitchen, it was packaging that made dinner taste better. Number 6, Lacto-fermentation in stoneware crocks. This is one of the great kitchen alchemies. You take a raw vegetable, add salt, keep it submerged, and let the right microbes take over before the wrong ones can. That is how cabbage becomes sauerkraut, how cucumbers become real fermented pickles, and how people across cultures figured out that controlled decay is not decay at all. It is transformation. This is the other thing my wife Marie and I do that we are both genuinely obsessed with. We shred cabbage, weigh it, and add 2% of its weight in non-iodized salt, so 20 grams per kilogram of cabbage. We massage it until it starts releasing liquid, pack it tightly into a wide-mouthed jar, and weigh it down under a small Ziploc bag filled with brine so the cabbage stays submerged below the surface. At room temperature, around 65 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, it starts bubbling quietly within 2 to 3 days. We taste it starting at around day 7. By day 14 to 21, it is properly sour and fantastic. We have been doing a version with caraway seeds and juniper berries that has become a household staple. How to do it? Shred or chop your vegetables, mix in salt at 2% by weight, pack tightly into a clean glass jar or stoneware crock, and press the vegetables down so the brine rises above them. Weigh them down to keep them submerged. Cover loosely to let gas escape. Fermentation time varies by temperature. Cooler rooms produce slower, more complex ferments. Properly fermented vegetables keep for months in a cool location, and for several months more in the fridge. The result is food that lasts longer, tastes deeper, and is genuinely better for you than what you started with. Number 5, preserving fruit in honey. Honey is one of the oldest preservatives humans have ever trusted, and ancient preservation records keep coming back to it. Not because it tastes good, but because in high enough concentration, it is genuinely hostile to spoilage. Honey has low water activity, natural antimicrobial compounds, and a low pH. Fruit preserved in honey was not just dessert. It was a method for trapping a harvest inside something that could outlast the season. The quick version: choose sound, unblemished fruit. Stone fruits, berries, and figs all work well, and pack them into a clean jar. Pour raw, unheated honey over them until every piece is fully covered with at least a ½ inch of honey above the top layer. Seal it and let it sit. Over the following weeks, the fruit releases some moisture into the honey, and the honey slowly draws into the fruit, softening and flavoring it. The exact shelf life depends on the moisture content of the fruit you use. A high moisture fruit like strawberries will shorten the window. For lower moisture fruits packed well in raw honey, you're looking at months of shelf-stable storage in a cool, dark pantry. What honey was doing centuries ago is the same job refined sugar later took over. It was turning a short fruit season into something that could last. Number 4, waxing cheese for cellar storage. Waxing cheese feels civilized, like putting a proper jacket on something before sending it out into the world. The idea is solid. Coat a hard cheese to protect it from mold and moisture loss, and let it age in peace without drying out or growing a forest on the outside. My Uncle Bernard has been waxing his own wheels of aged cheddar for years down in his cellar. He buys the wax in blocks, melts it to around 225 degrees Fahrenheit, and dips his wheels twice, letting the first coat set before adding the second. He has eaten cheese he waxed 18 months prior, and says it is better than the day he bought it. The man is rarely wrong about cheese. The method: start with only appropriate hard cheeses. Think aged cheddar, Gouda, Edam, Manchego. Pat the surface dry. Melt food-grade cheese wax to about 225 degrees Fahrenheit and apply it with a natural bristle brush, or by dipping. covering the entire surface with no gaps. 2 coats are better than 1. Store the waxed wheel in a cool, dark cellar between 50 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit, turning it every week or 2 to prevent moisture from pooling. Done correctly, this can extend the aging life of the cheese for a year or more. The critical caveat is this: do not assume a supermarket cheese becomes shelf stable just because you covered it in wax. Modern commercial cheeses are made for refrigeration. This method works only when the cheese itself was made for it. Number 3, alcohol preservation / brandied fruit / rumtopf. This tradition is simply beautiful. You layer summer fruit into a large crock with sugar and strong spirits, rum traditionally, though brandy works wonderfully, and let time and alcohol do the slow work of preservation. You're not trying to keep fruit tasting fresh. You're trying to capture abundance and turn it into something better. The method: start with the first ripe fruit of summer, strawberries, cherries, apricots, and layer them in a large stoneware crock or glass jar with an equal weight of white sugar. Pour enough rum with at least 54% alcohol content over the top to fully cover everything. From there, every time a new fruit comes into season through the summer, you add it: raspberries, peaches, plums, figs, always with an equal weight of sugar and enough additional rum to keep everything submerged. The critical rule is total coverage at all times. Any fruit that floats above the surface and hits air will turn. Keep it weighted down. After the last fruit addition, seal the crock and let it mature for at least 6 weeks before opening. What you end up with is fruit that has traded its freshness for something richer, deeper, darker, and genuinely extraordinary over a dessert or mixed into whipped cream in December. Number 2, Springhouse or evaporative cooling. A Springhouse is one of the most elegant food technologies ever built, not because it is complicated, but because it turns geography into refrigeration. Build a small structure over a cold spring or alongside moving water, keep it shaded and thick-walled, and you have a naturally cool room without a compressor, a plug, or a bill. Cold moving water maintains a remarkably consistent temperature year-round. In a properly built Springhouse, that cold flows through channels or sits below a slatted floor, keeping the air in the stone or wooden shelves above it at temperatures that would make a modern refrigerator proud. Historically, these were used for butter, milk, cream, cheese, crocks of pickles and fermented foods, and produce. There's no recipe here because this is not a jar method. It is architecture. But the principle is simple and brilliant. If you have cold moving water, you have the engine for refrigeration. Everything else is just building around it. Number 1, root cellaring. And here it is, the big one. The broadest, most foundational, most dependable preservation system on this list. And it deserves the top spot because it was never just a trick. It was a complete storage philosophy. Root cellaring means dark, cool, humid, ventilated storage designed specifically around the actual biological needs of the crops you are storing. Not one size fits all. The root cellar is the opposite of a refrigerator. It does not chill everything to 38 degrees Fahrenheit and call it done. It creates zones and conditions that match what each crop actually needs to stay alive and dormant through the winter. The method: sort the harvest ruthlessly. Only perfect produce goes in because one rotten potato really will ruin the rest. Then, store the right crops in the right conditions. Root vegetables like carrots, beets, parsnips, and turnips want cold and very high humidity, ideally 90 to 95%. Store them in damp sand or sawdust to maintain that moisture. Potatoes want the same cold and humidity, but need complete darkness to prevent greening. Cabbage, apples, and pears want cold and high humidity, but need to be separated from each other and from strong-smelling roots. Onions, garlic, and winter squash want cool and dry, the opposite of the roots. A solid root cellar runs between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and done right, it holds potatoes for 5 to 8 months, carrots for 4 to 6 months, cabbage for 3 to 5 months, and apples for 2 to 5 months, depending on the variety. This is earth-powered storage. The underground refrigerator that existed before the refrigerator industry convinced us that cold had to come with a cord. It worked then. Where people still use it today, it still works now. That is the full list. 20 methods that fed generations before anyone thought to sell them a monthly electric bill. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.